My name is Madison Greer, and I never asked to be the one anyone counted on. I keep to myself, live in a condo near Valmont Park, and fix supply chain problems for a living. That morning, I was just back from a red-eye work trip and halfway through reheating soup when the doorbell rang twice sharp. Insistent and out of place. I opened the door to a box on my doorstep with no return address. But her handwriting on the label stopped me cold. Inside, there was a Ziploc full of pill bottles, a folded copy of an advance directive, and an envelope marked M, please. I'm sorry. I didn't want to read it. I read it anyway. It was from Celeste. Of course. All looping letters and half apologies. She's slipping fast. She wrote, I've been trying. I swear. But I can't watch her disappear one day at a time. You were always better at this. You don't fall apart. I'm transferring her care. I signed everything. It's legal. I stood in the kitchen holding a power of attorney form with both our names on it and realized she had already signed over guardianship. Not to a facility. Not to a professional, just to me. I stared at the signature until it blurred, then looked up to see her across the street. Celeste was in the back seat of a black car, waving through the window with her sunglasses still on. She didn't even get out. When the car pulled away, I didn't chase after it. I turned back to the apartment and saw our mother sitting on the lobby bench. A small duffel at her feet. Coat buttoned wrong. She looked up at me with no recognition in her eyes. Only confusion. Like she wasn't sure where she'd ended up. I opened the door. Not with forgiveness, but with muscle memory. She stood slowly, hands trembling, and said, You live here now. I nodded once and stepped aside. I guess I do. I called her that same night, my thumb hovering for only a second before hitting dial. When she answered, there was music in the background and the clink of a glass. And she laughed like nothing about this was serious. Madison. She sang, I was wondering when you'd blow up. I didn't breathe before saying, She's asleep on my couch. Celeste. And you're sipping cocktails in Sedona. She clicked her tongue like I'd overreacted. She's better off with you. You always kept things together. You remember all the medical stuff. I bit down hard before I spoke again. You didn't even walk her in. You left her like she was someone else's problem and called that a handoff. Celeste sighed like I was exhausting her. I didn't think you'd make it such a thing. You're not sentimental. You're practical. You get stuff done. I stepped into the hallway to keep my voice steady. She didn't even recognize me. She asked if this was a hotel. Celeste didn't answer at first. Just sipped something audibly and finally muttered, That's how it goes. I pressed in. Each word sharp. You're her daughter. She changed your diapers. Paid for your braces. You don't get to tap out because the narrative doesn't look good on your feed. Her voice turned clipped. Don't act like this is some moral high ground. You cut her off for years. I kept my grip tight around the phone as she added, You barely returned her messages after college. You ghosted Thanksgiving 3 years in a row. Don't pretend you've always been the hero. I answered without hesitation. I never claimed to be the hero. But I didn't leave her with a bag of pills and a notarized letter like she was a tax write-off. There was a pause. Then she murmured, You always loved being the martyr. I let the silence stretch before saying, You always loved being adored. Now no one's watching. She exhaled, slow and dramatic, then said, I'm not built for this. Maddie, you are. You were always the one who could stand still while everything fell apart. I swallowed back the lump that formed too fast. I'm not standing still. I'm the one cleaning up after you again. She didn't apologize. She just said, You'll do the right thing. You always do. Then the line clicked dead. And all that was left was the soft sound of my mother breathing down the hall. In a place she didn't choose. In a home that wasn't hers. Simone raised an eyebrow before I finished the sentence. "Let me guess," she said, closing the register drawer. "Celeste's off finding herself again and left you a human being to manage." I didn't laugh. She signed over guardianship without even asking me. Dropped Mom off like dry cleaning and drove away. Simone didn't blink. That sounds on brand. I leaned against the counter. Arms crossed tight. I haven't spoken to her in any real way in years. Now suddenly, I'm in charge of a woman who doesn't know what year it is. Simone wiped her hands on a towel and said, "So don't keep her. Take her to county. You didn't sign anything." I shook my head. "I can't. It's already filed. And even if it weren't, I'm not the one who disappears." She poured 2 cups of tea like we did in college and slid one toward me. "Madison, you've spent your whole adult life avoiding your mother. Why now?" I stared into the cup. "Because even when I hated her, I always thought I'd have time to make it make sense. And now she doesn't remember anything except the way to confuse a thermostat." Simone didn't press. Just said, "Sometimes standing still isn't the same as staying." That night, Mom stood in the hallway in one of my old sweaters, looking at the gallery wall like she'd never seen it before. Her voice was light when she asked, "Is that your father?" I looked at the photo of a man who left before I had memories to keep. "No, that's Simone's dog. You took that picture on a disposable camera in '98. She squinted, then laughed softly. "I used to love cameras." Later, I found her asleep on the couch with a teabag wrapper in her hand, like she meant to ask for something and never got to it. I knelt down to take it from her fingers and paused. On the wrapper, written in the corner with a shaky pen, were the words, "Don't leave." I sat there staring at it, the clock ticking in the quiet, and felt something settle in my chest. I didn't know if she'd written it for me or to herself, but I stayed. Most mornings started with confusion and ended in repetition. She'd stand in the kitchen holding a box of oatmeal, unsure if she'd eaten, then ask where the dog was. Though we never had one. "You always kept a golden retriever," she insisted, tapping the counter like memory would appear. I told her no every time, and every time she tilted her head, unconvinced. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she asked if my father was coming by for dinner. I didn't look up. He moved to Oregon in '96 and never sent a birthday card after that. She frowned at the socks in her lap. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I'm the one who checked the mailbox for a year." That night, she sat beside me on the couch watching a home renovation show, then suddenly turned and asked, "Did you ever finish college?" I stared at the screen. "Yes. In-state. On scholarship. You said I was selfish for turning down the out-of-state one." Her mouth twitched. I said that I didn't answer. And neither did she. On a Tuesday, she mistook me for Celeste and asked if I still played piano. "I never played piano," I said, placing her pill organizer on the table. She reached for it slowly. "That was me," she whispered. "I used to practice Bach after dinner." I nodded. Celeste thought it was boring. Her voice softened. She liked noise. You liked quiet. Later, she wandered into my office, trailing an old photograph from the drawer she'd been digging through. "You were wearing blue," she said, pointing to my 8-year-old self at the zoo. Face smeared with ice cream. I remember that day. I took the photo from her hand. "You left early to meet someone." She blinked. "Did I?" I said nothing. That weekend, she had one of her clear spells. Brief and sharp like lightning, we sat across from each other, and she looked directly at me. "You were always easier to leave," she said. I didn't flinch. I was also the one who waited. She nodded slowly, her hands folded in her lap. That's why you scare me. After she fell asleep that night, I opened the cabinet where she'd stuffed all her sweaters. Folded in the back was a faded scarf I hadn't seen since high school, one she used to wear every Sunday. I touched the fabric, cold and soft, and whispered, "You kept something. After all." Then I turned off the light and stood there in the dark for a long time. The invitation arrived in a glossy envelope with my name misspelled and no return address. Inside was a card embossed with gold leaf announcing a visionary wellness lifestyle launch hosted by Everett McKinley and featuring an intimate moment with his muse. The muse was Celeste. Her name printed in looping script beneath a black and white photo of her perched on a velvet sofa. I stared at it for a full minute before tossing it onto the counter. 3 days later, I walked into a private gallery in Santa Fe that smelled like eucalyptus and designer rugs. A small stage had been set near the back where Celeste stood in a linen jumpsuit, holding a flute of champagne like it was part of her hand. "And now," she said, beaming at the crowd, "I want to share someone very special with all of you." She turned and extended a hand toward the side curtain. "This is my mother, Nora Greer. She taught me everything about grace." I stepped out before the applause started, holding the signed guardianship order and a printed transcript of her voicemail from 6 months ago. "You didn't teach her anything," I said, my voice calm. "You left her in a hallway with a bag of pill bottles and didn't look back." Celeste froze, her hand midair. "Madison," she said, teeth clenched in a smile. "Not now." "Oh, I think now works just fine," I continued, stepping forward. "You called me from a resort and told me you weren't built for this. You said she was mine now," the audience murmured, confused. Everett took a slow step away from the mic stand, his smile faltering. Celeste tried to laugh it off. "We're sisters. We joke." I knew she'd be dramatic. I didn't blink. "I knew you'd be cruel. But I didn't expect you to package it as performance art." She reached for the champagne again, but her hand shook. "You don't know what it was like." Watching her fall apart. I folded the transcript in half. "I do. I watched her forget my name and still remember how you liked your eggs." I held her hand while she asked where you went. Someone in the crowd snapped a photo. The flash too bright. Celeste flinched. "I wanted to honor her," she said, voice cracking. "This was supposed to be beautiful." I nodded. "Then you should have shown up when she still knew your face." "Not now. Not for a gallery wall and curated grief." Everett stepped forward, whispering something in her ear. She didn't answer. I turned to leave. But she called after me. Desperate now. "You poisoned her against me." I stopped. "She didn't need help forgetting you." Her shoulders collapsed inward. "I thought maybe I could fix things." I looked back once. "You thought wrong." That night, I found her name trending online for the wrong reasons. The clip had gone viral. Her frozen smile contrasted against my steady voice. I didn't save the video. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the empty teacup on my nightstand. Then I opened the closet and pulled down Mom's scarf, still smelling faintly of lavender, and held it like proof that none of it had been performative. Not for me. Not for her. The memorial was small. Just a circle of friends who remembered her before the forgetting began. Simone stood beside me, quiet, holding 2 cups of weak coffee while I adjusted the photo frame on the table. "You okay?" she asked. Not softly. Not dramatically, just directly. I nodded. "I'm not angry anymore." After the service, a woman with silver hair stopped me at the door and pressed my hand. "You're Nora's daughter," she asked. Voice warm. I hesitated a breath too long. Then said, "No, but I was the one who stayed." She smiled like she understood more than I meant her to. She was lucky. You know, I answered without blinking. So was I. Back home, I folded the guest chairs and packed away the leftover pastries into Tupperware that would sit in the fridge too long. Simone handed me a glass of wine and dropped onto the couch. You didn't have to carry it all. I sat beside her, careful not to spill. Maybe not. But I'm the only one who didn't set it down. That night, I pulled out the scarf again and finally tucked it into the drawer by my bed. It didn't feel heavy anymore, just worn and true. When I turned off the light, the apartment was still, not empty. For the first time in years, the silence felt like mine. A week later, while picking up takeout, the woman at the counter glanced at the name on the receipt. You're Greer's daughter. Right. I paused. Madison. I said, just Madison. She handed over the bag and smiled. She talked about you. Said you were strong. I exhaled. She wasn't wrong. Back on the sidewalk, I passed the bookstore and saw the display Simone had set up. A handwritten sign tucked into the window in memory of Nora Greer, Quiet Courage. Louder than it looked. I stood there for a moment, then kept walking. There was nothing left to explain. If you've ever carried someone else's story without being asked, I hope you know it still counts. And if you've ever stayed when it would have been easier to leave, I hope you know it mattered. Thank you for listening to mine. If this story found you at the right time, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment and let's keep holding space for stories that don't make the headlines but change everything. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. I read every city, every hour, every story you leave behind. And if you found something of yourself in these moments, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. Sometimes, connection begins with one quiet yes.